Good evening and welcome to Rapid Report, where we break down the most critical global news that shapes economies and nations. Tonight, we turn our attention to a stunning development between Canada and the United States, a crisis that could redefine the dynamics of North American trade. In a bold and strategic move, Canada has sharply curtailed its exports of softwood lumber to the United States. Market watchers are calling it a calculated shock. Lumber prices have skyrocketed, American construction sites are coming to a halt, and Washington finds itself facing an unprecedented vulnerability. Behind the headlines, former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney orchestrated a sophisticated strategy, leveraging environmental caps, inspections, export quotas, and market diversification to Europe and Asia. Tonight, we'll break down the immediate market impacts, the geopolitical implications, and the potential long-term consequences of this crisis. We'll explore why Canada's actions signal a shift in power and how the U.S., despite its size, is struggling to respond. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your friends, because this story isn't just about wood, it's about economic leverage, national strategy, and the future of North American alliances. Stay with us. A major timber crisis shakes U.S. construction and tests North American alliances. In an unprecedented economic maneuver, Canada has unleashed a major commercial crisis that is rattling the United States. At the heart of the storm is a strategic decision by the Canadian government to drastically slow down exports of softwood lumber to its southern neighbor, a move framed publicly as an environmental initiative. The consequences were immediate and severe. U.S. lumber prices soared, construction projects stalled, and Washington found itself exposed in a way that few anticipated. The shock of lumber. The crisis began quietly, but escalated rapidly. Canadian authorities announced a sudden shift in export policy, signaling restrictions on softwood shipments to the United States. Within hours, the price of lumber shot upward, spiking nearly 15% in some markets. For American builders, who rely heavily on Canadian timber, the effects were immediate. Construction sites halted, supply chains froze, and the economic ripple spread beyond individual contractors to the broader housing market. This was no spontaneous reaction. Behind the scenes, former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney had orchestrated a calculated and multifaceted strategy designed to maximize leverage while maintaining international legitimacy. A subtle but potent strategy. Carney's approach combined legal, economic, and environmental tactics. 1. Environmental caps. By imposing stringent environmental limits on timber exports, Canada justified its move under the pretext of sustainability. These caps were designed to reduce supply to the U.S. without violating international trade rules outright. 2. Enhanced inspections. Shipments destined for American markets underwent additional scrutiny, slowing deliveries and raising logistical costs for importers. 3. Quota implementation. Export quotas were introduced, further tightening supply and creating scarcity in U.S. markets. 4. Market diversification. Crucially, Canada redirected excess supply to Europe and Asia, ensuring that lost revenue from the U.S. was offset, while simultaneously sending a clear signal that the U.S. was no longer Canada's sole priority. Trump confronts a crisis without levers. For former President Donald Trump, whose negotiating style relies heavily on escalation, bluster, and immediate pressure, the situation proved uniquely challenging. The U.S. is structurally dependent on Canadian softwood lumber, making conventional retaliatory threats largely ineffective. Trade sanctions or tariffs would hurt U.S. businesses more than Canadian exporters in the short term. Meanwhile, Canadian policymakers had prepared this economic maneuver for months, ensuring that every action was measured, legally defensible, and psychologically impactful. The immediate effect was a blend of market chaos and political frustration. Trump responded with social media statements, but these carried no weight in reversing the supply bottleneck. Meetings in Washington were convened in haste, but officials struggled to identify a solution. The U.S. simply had no contingency plan for the loss of Canadian timber. An explosive announcement with a disguised face. The Canadian government framed its measures as part of a broader initiative called Strategic Preservation of Resources, a document that emphasized environmental stewardship and long-term sustainability. While the United States struggles to meet carbon standards, Canada positioned itself as a responsible player in global climate commitments, a move that insulated it from potential backlash in international forums. What might have been perceived as a trade war appeared instead as a carefully crafted ecological policy. Immediate market effects. Lumber prices jumped 15% in just 2 hours. Major U.S. construction firms suspended timber purchases indefinitely. Housing projects and renovations across North America slowed or stopped. Trump's reactive measures proved symbolic rather than effective, highlighting U.S. vulnerability. Canada secures new markets. While American contractors faced paralysis, Canada moved decisively to secure alternative buyers. European nations, Japan, and emerging Asian markets were offered attractive contracts, ensuring that Canadian exporters could maintain revenue streams while exerting maximum pressure on U.S. supply chains. The structural dependency of the United States on Canadian timber had been starkly exposed. The psychological blow to Washington Trump's conventional tactics, escalation, public threats, and rapid-fire pressure, were ineffective against this sophisticated, multi-layered strategy. Carney's use of international law, sustainability rhetoric, and market redirection created a shield that neutralized direct retaliation. The White House was forced into emergency meetings with no immediate recourse, while public opinion internationally appeared to side with Canada, given the green justification for the measures. A historical reversal. For decades, Canada was often perceived as the junior partner in North American trade. That perception is now being challenged. Softwood lumber has become more than a commodity. It is a symbol of sovereignty, strategy, and leverage. The visual of Canadian timber trucks rerouted to ports in Europe and Asia, bypassing the U.S. entirely, has emerged as a symbol of a durable realignment in global trade. 3 possible futures. Business-driven de-escalation. U.S. corporate pressure forces Washington to seek a compromise or negotiate concessions. 2. Escalation risk. Trump opts for countermeasures, potentially threatening border closures or tariffs, risking a wider economic confrontation. 3. Permanent pivot. Canada continues its strategic diversification toward Europe and Asia, reducing dependence on the U.S. market for good, drawing a line in the sand. This crisis demonstrates Canada's newfound willingness and capacity to exert economic influence over its southern neighbor. The U.S. is now confronted with the cost of structural dependency, while Canada leverages both market strategy and environmental policy to assert autonomy. The pressing question remains, will the U.S. seek accommodation, or will it escalate the confrontation and intensify the crisis? The timber crisis is more than a commercial dispute. It is a strategic demonstration of power, foresight, and patience. By using environmental regulation as a tool of leverage, Canada has shown that it can impose economic consequences on the world's largest economy, potentially redefining the dynamics of North American trade relations for years to come. A carefully calibrated strategic move. Canada's decision is far from spontaneous. Beneath the apparent environmental rationale lies a deliberate economic pressure strategy. Mark Carney employed a multi-layered approach. 1. Legal and diplomatic shield. By invoking environmental standards and quotas, Canada stays firmly within international trade law. This makes it difficult for the U.S. to retaliate directly without risking legitimacy or international criticism. 2. Economic leverage. The immediate spike in U.S. lumber prices creates a shock across the construction sector, affecting housing, renovations, and related industries. Every day of supply disruption translates into billions of dollars in potential losses. 3. Psychological and political pressure. Trump, accustomed to short-term escalation and intimidation, faces a structural crisis. Conventional pressure tactics fail, forcing Washington into reactive and urgent measures, undermining Trump's image as a strong negotiator. This strategy demonstrates Canada's mastery of soft economic warfare, striking decisively without triggering a direct conflict while maintaining international credibility. Implications for the North American alliance. This crisis could mark a historic turning point in Canada's U.S. relations. End of the junior partner role. For the first time, Canada shows it can impose conditions and influence the American market without bowing to U.S. pressure. Redefining dependencies. The United States must now seriously consider diversifying timber sources or developing alternative materials to reduce vulnerability. Global symbolism. Other nations are watching closely. The lesson is clear. Structural dependency on a single supplier is a geopolitical risk, an interwoven ecological and economic crisis. The Canadian move demonstrates how environmental policy can be wielded as a strategic lever. Environmental measures legitimize the action on the global stage. They protect Canada's forest resources while applying pressure on a dependent partner. They create a positive narrative. Canada acts sustainably, while the U.S. appears less committed to climate standards. This duality turns timber into both a sovereignty tool and a commercial diplomatic instrument. Possible future scenarios. 1. Business-driven de-escalation. Major U.S. companies might pressure the government to negotiate, avoiding a prolonged supply freeze. 2. Political escalation by Trump. Threats such as border closures or tariffs could be attempted, but these measures risk backfiring on the U.S. itself. 3. Permanent pivot by Canada. If U.S. dependence persists and tensions continue, Canada could permanently shift its exports to more lucrative and strategic European and Asian markets. A lesson in economic power. This timber crisis underscores a fundamental geopolitical truth. Economic dependency creates vulnerability, and long-term strategic planning outweighs short-term escalation. Canada has shown it can strike the heart of a powerful ally while maintaining legal and moral credibility. The image of Canadian timber trucks rerouting to European and Asian ports symbolizes this shift. Canada no longer submits to Washington, but actively chooses its partners and markets. This crisis is far from over. Canada has demonstrated that even its largest neighbor can be impacted by carefully executed economic strategies. Whether this leads to negotiations, escalation, or a permanent realignment of trade toward Europe and Asia, one thing is clear. The old assumptions of North American economic dominance are being challenged. We want to hear what you think. Will the U.S. find a way to respond? Or is this the start of a new era of Canadian economic influence? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this report insightful, make sure to subscribe to Rapid Report for timely updates on major global developments. Like the video to help others stay informed and share it with your network. Stay tuned, because here on Rapid Report we bring you the news that matters. Fast, accurate, and in-depth.